Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and the motion before the House tonight is this House would abolish welfare. So first of all, of course, I am the proposition. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, welfare must be abolished because it fails. Moreover, it is fundamentally unfair. Thirdly, it leads to an overweening state. And lastly, it is a drag on the economy. So, as Ronald Reagan famously said, that we declared war on poverty, and poverty won. So it has boomeranged spectacularly. It's actually aggravated the problem, not solved it. You could look at really any highly advanced Western economy you like, and you could look at the billions of dollars, or depending how large and wealthy the country is, tens of billions of dollars that have been spent on anti-poverty programs in the last few decades. And you think, why does poverty still exist? It should have long since been abolished. Why do we never see the abolishment of poverty? And as I say, it actually makes things worse, and it creates a dependency culture. If you pay people to do nothing, then they will do nothing. There's state-subsidized idleness. So people need to be self-reliant, take responsibility for their own choices, and so no more state-funded healthcare, because that's a redistribution of money from the dynamic to the idle and the underperforming. We would still keep primary and secondary schooling taxpayer funded, but higher education, after the age of 18, that's it, you've got to pay for it yourself. Take out a loan, be an autodidact. I did a degree online, law degree, University of London, £4,000, not per year. The entire thing was £4,000. If you're willing to make the effort, if you genuinely have the academic aptitude, you can do it for a low cost. You don't need to spend £40,000 on these things. So no more unemployment benefit, otherwise people will choose to idle around, so they're just chilling on the dole. People going on the sick, pretending to be disabled when they're not, when they're perfectly capable of working, saying they're too depressed to work. It's risible. No more child benefit. You wish to bring children into the world, that is fabulous. However, you must then take responsibilities up to you to pay for them, and otherwise be a bit more careful about the choices you make. I realise some people are imprudent, have more children they can care for. We don't want the children to suffer. If these parents really can't cope, the children will be taken into care and brought up in an orphanage. So, as I say, it has been an absolute disaster, the welfare state, over a century of it, by creating an underclass of people who are long-term unemployed, who are permanently on benefits. They view it as a career path. And indeed, a lot of people who immigrate to countries, some of them work, that's fantastic, but some of them don't. They're off the boat and onto the gravy train, and they see that's a way forward. A lot of people are doing the double, working illegally, whilst also milking the system, claiming all sorts of benefits and income support and universal credit. Different countries have got different names for this sort of thing. So no more, put a stop to it right now, and it'll get a lot better, and I'll show you why. Well, first of all, it is grossly unfair. It's flagrantly unjust that hard-working people should have to shell out for the lackadaisical, and the responsible end up footing the bill for the irresponsible. So take responsibility for your own actions, because we have agency, you have freedom of choice, freedom of contract, and therefore you have to bear the consequences of your decisions. And this will push people more on the way of making sensible choices. So too many freeloaders who are getting a free ride on the backs of those who are actually strivers, as Margaret Thatcher would have called them. Remember, Thatcher said the trouble with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. And the welfare state is socialistic. It eventually leads to full-blown socialism. And as we know, that has been cataclysmic in every single case. I'll come on to the third point. It's a more philosophical one. The way that we ought to have limited government, the night watchman state. Like in the 18th century or early 19th century, the state's only there to intervene in emergencies. There are certain duties of the state which can only be performed thereby, such as running the armed forces. But the more tax we pay, the less choice we have, and vice versa. So this is sort of a zero-sum gain. The government's taking more money off you, therefore you have less of it to spend at your own discretion. So we allow individuals to spend their own money insofar as possible. If I could have zero tax, I would. But that's not practical, that's a theoretical endpoint, and we strive towards that goal. We can at least get closer towards that ideal. So people have greater personal autonomy under my system, and the government's not coming in to sort it out for you. So the government should practice masterly inactivity, as in just not to intervene as much as possible. And this is a wider philosophy of mine of we allow prostitution, completely legal, smoking, buying any sorts of substances, things like that, lap dancing, gambling. Obviously, we do have age limits on these things. So perhaps it's a case of being cruel to be kind. We need to practice a bit of tough love so people get off their backsides, get out there and get a job. I know a young man who's 35, worked for 1 month of his life. He lives with his parents, gets subventions from them, and that's preposterous. It's a case of learned helplessness. People believe they can't do anything and they depend on others. So, you can't always be there. Panhandling, come on. You've got to man up, grow a pair, get a job. So I say, laissez-faire, laissez-passer. And the government should no longer be intervening, collecting data, taking money off people, and trying to dictate to us every tiny facet of our lives. No more nanny state. I'll tell you how it's a drag on the economy, because money's taken away from the hardest working people, those who really produce wealth, and given to those who really are just parasitical. And that is terrible. And so it slows down the economy. It can put the economy into recession. You look at South Korea or Japan or even China, countries with very good economic growth for years, and they don't have any of this nonsense. Even some of the less developed countries which are racing ahead, like say India, it doesn't have this very much, and that's precisely why the stagnant economies of Western Europe, the reason they've slowed down and stopped in many cases, let's say Spain or Greece, is precisely because of this over-generous welfare system. It's very easy to be generous with other people's money. So get rid of that and the economies will race ahead again. And individuals say, oh, how will I afford health insurance? Well, because you'll have more money of yours own to spend. We reduce tax very substantially. No more wasting it on welfare payments, and also slim down the military, which sometimes is a form of welfare as well. And that's that. So we would keep pensions because they're contributory. Obviously, you could opt out, go for a private pension scheme. Healthcare wouldn't be too expensive because we'd have a very free market approach, minimal regulation. You can choose the most expensive one, which is, probably going to be highly effective, very fast service, all the rest of it. You can choose the cheapest one, which is less extensive and maybe laxer in its regulations. That's up to you. That's what freedom is. So for those reasons, I beg to propose. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now for the opposition. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, we must retain the welfare state for the following reasons. Social justice. Because of the disastrous consequences of getting rid of the welfare state, because what the role of government is to provide welfare, and lastly, because it's an economic boon. So, social justice. We have billionaires in this world, and then we have people who are starving to death. Something's not quite right about that. It behoves us to care for other people. Yes, I am my brother's keeper. So we could abolish poverty in a year if we really wanted, if we really redistributed wealth. But even in our own country, the poor have so little and the rich have so much. So it's true that in developed countries, people are not actually dying of malnutrition. In some countries they are, but you have some mercy. There's a lot of avoidable suffering, and if we can prevent it, then we have a moral duty to do so. So therefore, we have reasonably high tax rates on the super rich, and all their billions don't actually make them happy. I once worked for an extremely wealthy man who had over $10 billion. I better to say it, not to say his name. And he was one of the most miserable people I've ever met. Always carping. What a misanthrope, a real whinge bag. But anyway, his wealth could have done so much for the neediest. So if someone is suffering in agony and we could afford to treat their problem, should we not do so? Yes, of course we should do so. It's a no-brainer. We don't want malnutrition. We want people to live in decent housing and so on. We're not saying the lap of the luxury, but just the basics to be provided. And the speaker on the other side, why not go further? You said you'd have publicly funded schools. Why? Why not make people pay for primary school fees? And if your parents can't afford it, that's your problem. You never get to read and write. Let's go back to Dickensian era with children working down coal mines, or sent up the chimney as a chimney sweep, things like that. You may as well bring back slavery the way you're going on. It's utterly cruel, and you want people to be wage slaves, if not actually chattel. So have some compassion for the needy, and it could be you, quite a privileged person, who's espousing this repulsive policy. What if you were like that? What about disabled people? Some people are born mentally and physically disabled, are incapable of working. So we have a duty to help them out, and private charity is not enough. Other countries have tried it, and not enough people donate sufficient amounts. For a moment, let's consider what the repercussions would be of the complete abolition of welfare, such as proposed by the side opposite. We would have more illness, people wouldn't be able to afford to go to the doctor, more suffering, more people unable to work. We'd also have more crime. The devil makes work for idle hands. Why is it unemployment goes up and down? There isn't a sudden outbreak of lassitude. It's because of the economic cycle. People lose their jobs through no fault of their own. You don't have to be a left-winger to recognise this. Many conservative politicians in many countries agree there should be some sort of a welfare state. And even the Republican Party in the USA doesn't actually want to abolish Medicare and Medicaid or food stamps or, unemployment payments. They just want to reduce it. All right. So there will be more suffering. There will be social unrest, great upheaval. This is the kind of thing that leads to revolution. What about human rights? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and numerous other human rights instruments have recognized that people have a right to a decent standard of living, a right to food, such as Cuba recognizes. So we don't want people to die avoidably. So it would be grossly abusive to get rid of the welfare state altogether. There's a reason why no country has done it. As we became democratic, we moved towards having a welfare state. I don't want total welfare. I'm not proposing complete communism, but there needs to be a sensible balance. What we hear opposite is fanaticism. It's free market fundamentalism. It's absolutely off the scale. This freedom of contract theory is for the birds. Contracts are not absolutely free. We're all subject to severe economic pressures, and some people have far more bargaining power than others, and it was wrong for the mighty to push the feeble to the wall. So let's consider the role of government. Why do governments exist at all? Because we've organised ourselves into countries or communities, and we face common problems. Therefore, we have to work together. We share our abilities to tackle problems which impact on all of us. No man is an island entire of himself. So mutual aid, that's what makes civil society. And governments sometimes have to assume responsibility for people who are unable to take care of themselves. He said he wanted the armed forces. All right. Well, so you're willing to have the government killing people but not saving them? It's ridiculous. He said the fire brigade and so on. Why not have a private fire brigade? In the 17th century, fire brigades are private companies. They would turn up at your house if it was burning down and then negotiate their price. And people in their panic, without having a real choice, would agree to pay an infinite sum. You have to pay us to save your daughter. And people would agree to pay a sum they could never possibly pay back. And that is ridiculous. That is, signing contracts under duress. So, of course, the government's got to help people and organise these things to reduce suffering, because people can find themselves out of work for no reason at all. Now let me go on how it actually helps the economy. You say it might make people overcautious, but no, it doesn't, because people are then so worried about losing their job or whatever that they don't take risks, so they dare not set up a business, because if it goes wrong, they'll be out on the streets. But the dole helps them to take reasonable risks. And having a healthier, more educated population is an enormous boon to the economy. You can see the Republic of Ireland, we've got one of the highest university participation rates on the globe, on the planet. 50% of young people going to tertiary education, and our economy has taken off. Our economic growth has skyrocketed in the last quarter of a century. So we have a healthier, happier population. We bring more skills to the job market. We have the knowledge economy now. So for all sorts of reasons, there's no question that it is a great economic boon. And no, I'm not crying for billionaires who have to share a tiny fraction of their wealth with those who are living in penury. So for the foregoing reasons, I urge the House to reject this repugnant motion.